In this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how a 1000 rated ELO chess player should think throughout the chess game. You're gonna know absolutely everything you need to beat everybody around. But there is one catch: if you're not gonna make it over the first 5 minutes of the video, you're gonna be stuck at 1000 ELO forever. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. Today I'm making something special. I'm gonna play against Elena here, who is 1200 rated ELO chess bot on chess.com, because first of all, a 1000 ELO rated chess player should play against stronger opponents. If you are not playing against stronger opponents, you never learn. So let's get into it. I'm gonna play as white, and first of all, you should always focus on the center. Center is the most important part of the board. This is a small center over here, 4 squares in the center, and this is the big center over here, 16 squares. This is where your main focus should always be. Then the second thing is you religiously focus on your development. So with every single move, you try to develop a new piece, and you never make a move that doesn't seem useful for you. What can be a useful move? Well, a move which is either bringing the new piece into the game, or fighting for the center, or making sure that your king is safe. It's absolutely everything you need to do in the opening, nothing else. Just absolutely forget about anything else that might be interesting for you, like developing your queen here and try to win a pawn by making 27 moves with the queen. No, just forget about all of that stupid things. Every single move you bring a new piece into the game, or you fight for the center. For example, I'm gonna play here c4 because I want to put some pressure on my opponent's center. And then I'm gonna continue with the same thing, bringing all of the pieces into the game. This is where you religiously should focus on. Just make it your goal for each of the games you're playing. Bring all of your pieces into the game before you lose it. I mean, let's be honest, in most of the cases you're gonna blunder everything anyway, so make it your focus to bring all of the forces into the battlefield before you start blundering all of them. So don't make 2 moves with the same piece if it's not attacked. This is your golden principle. This is what I'm gonna do here as well. It's time for me to bring my bishops into the game, so let me put the bishop on f4. An alternative could be g5, not that important. Important for you is that you try to find the most active square for the pieces. So not d2 in this case, but f4, where it controls more squares, puts some pressure on your opponent's position. And focusing on the center, because notice this knight went here to c3 and not here on an a3, because on a3 the knight is having less opportunities. It's difficult for it to somehow be useful to your army. So focus on the center. This is why it's so important. You always try to bring as many pieces into the center as possible. Now, the bishop can be a very tricky piece, because the bishop can stand somewhere here and still controlling the entire diagonal, including those squares in the center. So make sure that it's important not where the pieces stands, but which squares it controls. As far as the knights are concerned, it's always better to bring it towards the center than on the opposite side. So now we need to bring this guy. Never forget about anybody. You should make sure that everybody is happy in your camp. Not that one of your pieces is gonna go to the civil court and say, this dude is not respecting my rights. You don't want that. You want all of them to be participating. So my opponent plays c5 here, and yeah, I want to bring this bishop. We focus religiously on the development. There is one catch though. If you develop it immediately, then our opponent is gonna take here, and then we need to spend another move. So now we can just release a little bit of pressure in the center and take on d5. Now, this is a little bit of more advanced stuff, because to do that, you need to realize, if I do that, what can my opponent do? This is like the key thing in chess. And once you understand that, you're gonna increase your level from 1000 to like 1500 kind of immediately. Once you realize this one thing, you should always focus on what your opponent can do. So every time he makes his move, you're like, okay, he's playing c5. What does he want to achieve? What is the point of his move? What is the purpose? It's not like just, okay, he plays c5, random developing move, I don't care. No, this is wrong attitude. The right attitude is, what the pawn is doing on c5 that it wasn't doing on c7, and also what the pawn is not doing anymore as it's not on c7. For example, in this case, it doesn't control those squares. Can we use it somehow? No, we can't. What the pawn is doing on c5 now that it wasn't doing before, well, it attacks the d4 pawn. It wasn't the case before. The next question, though, you should ask yourself, is it dangerous for you? Like whether this move creates a threat, whether you should care about. Well, it attacks the d4 pawn once, and you have 1, 2, 3 defenders. So you can just ignore it, it's not a problem at all. Now you're thinking about your moves, what could be useful for yourself, and you of course remember about bringing all of your pieces into the game. This one is the last minor pieces. By the way, you always try to develop your minor pieces first, which are knights and bishops, and then the minor pieces. Why? Well, because, for example, if you develop your queen too early, then it's gonna get attacked and your opponent is gonna win time. Remember, you should focus on making just one move with every single piece. Not 2, not 3, not 5. Just one move with one piece, because that is the fastest way to bring all of them into the game. Okay, so yes, I mean, just playing bishop e2 is okay, it's not a big deal. Yes, your opponent takes, and then you need to spend a second move, which we rather want to avoid, but if you forget about it, not that important. Just focus on making that one move per piece rule. Okay, let me take it on d5. By the way, not necessarily it's so great, because now black can take with the knight, which she does, and now our bishop is under attack, and we need once again to deal with it. Let's just take on d5 and forget about it, because we need to do some real important stuff. Okay, now our opponent is actually once again distracting us, and we need to care about it. Yeah, so it's a little bit uncomfortable not to castle too early, because then your king is still in the center, and if your opponent has a way to attack it, then it might be a little bit inconvenient. Now, as an international master, I of course know how to deal with it, but if you are still just beginning your chess journey, that might be a little bit scary for you. Like, yeah, my king is here, not that safe, what do I do about it? Well, first of all, you of course need to think about how you can bring it into safety. Well, you need to castle. How to do that? This bishop stands on the way, so the bishop has to be developed. But if we develop it right now, our opponent can take. Do we have a good move afterwards? Let's hope we do, because, well, remember how we think about it. How many times our opponent attacks? Well, 1 and 2. We have still 3 defenders, which is more than enough, so let's not really care about it and just develop our pieces. Bishop e2, and now we are ready to castle. Our opponent plays c4, which is a quite dumb move, because he could have taken, or she could have taken here on d4 and then preparing some bishop b4 checks. And notice we couldn't have taken with the knight, because g2 would be hanging. Now, in that case, we could have taken with the queen. So once again, we would think, okay, what happens if we take with the knight? Does our opponent have any interesting ideas? And you always start with the most active opportunities. It counts both to you and to your opponent. Checks, captures, and threats. Those are the most active opportunities. And you should always think, do I have any checks, captures, and threats? And does my opponent have any of those? In this case, c4, we look at this move. Remember, that's the first thing we should focus on. Does c4 create any threats? For example, if we would have played bishop to d3 here, then c4 would attack our bishop, and we cannot ignore it. We cannot say, okay, let me castle, I don't care, development is the key focus. I have learned that from the Journey to Grandmaster YouTube channel. No, that is the wrong approach. Why? Because chess is quite complicated. It's not like you can just learn and memorize a set of principles, set of rules, even though they're very, very useful, and then constantly just implement it without looking at a particular situation. That doesn't work like that, exactly because of this reason, because your opponent is going to make a stupid move, one move threat, so-called hope chess, which is actually not great for him, because he's gonna suffer with this pawn on c4, it's going to be a weakness. But if it's like one move attack on your bishop and you ignore it, that is gonna work perfectly for him, and he's gonna think that he's the best player on the planet Earth, and you don't want that. You don't want to maximize the number of those arrogant bastards in the chess world. So let's stop that. Let's focus on what our opponent wants to achieve and try to understand whether it's dangerous for you, and if it is, try to stop the threat somehow. In our case, there is no threat, so let us just castle here and make sure the king is safe. Now, we have developed all of our minor pieces. We are controlling the center, because notice we have 2 central pawns and our opponent has only 1. Yes, he has an active queen, but the queen in the center in the beginning of the game is not such a great idea, because it can very easily be attacked, so we don't really care about that. We care about our development. Remember, this is the religiously best thing, the most important thing on the chessboard. So now the next step is to develop our rooks. Right now they're doing absolutely nothing. So let's get some job for them. First of all, this rook can be easily developed to c1. We don't really need to think too much about it. Of course, we take a look at what our opponent does. She played knight to c6, doesn't create any threats, not a problem. So we do that. Now our opponent plays a5. This is a huge mistake, and a very common mistake for a 1000 rated player. Instead of developing a new piece, she is doing something weird. She plays with the pawn on the A rank. We normally never move those pawns on the side of the board. Why? Because it doesn't fit our top 3 priorities. Focus on the center, focus on the development, make sure your king is safe. Does a5 help with one of those 3 goals? No, then we never make such moves. Just never make moves in the opening that doesn't fit into the description of those 3 goals. There is one exception though. If your opponent creates a threat, a direct threat for you, then of course you care about it. Otherwise, if you're thinking about your ideas, don't make any moves that don't fit into those 3 categories. Now, how do we continue? Well, we follow the same procedure. Is this move somehow a threat for us? Does it threaten anything? No, that's absolutely not the case. Then we need to focus on our opportunities. And remember, we always start with the most active opportunities: checks, captures, and threats. Because even if we are focused on our development, this is our main priority. But for some reason, our opponent decides to blunder his queen. We cannot ignore it, right? That would be stupid to develop our knight and say, okay, we care about the development, we bring all of the pieces into the board, but at the same time, we could have just taken the queen for free. That would be stupid. So to avoid such missed opportunities, we need to always start with the most active opportunities: checks, captures, and threats. Maybe, just maybe, we can immediately checkmate our opponent's king. Well, here it's definitely not the case, because our opponent is smart enough to make sure the king is solid there. The second step is to make sure we cannot capture something. In this case, the only thing that is physically possible to capture here is the c4 pawn. But wait, you don't need to immediately jump on it and say, I'm gonna take it and I don't care about anything else. No, you need to calculate the variation. This is a very difficult thing for you at this level. I definitely understand that, but we don't need to calculate for 10 moves like those crazy guys like Magnus Carlsen. No, we need to make human moves and human decisions. So how do we make human decisions? Well, if we want to capture something, we need to calculate the number of attackers and the number of defenders. If the number of attackers exceeds the number of defenders, then we are allowed to take this guy, or something that stands there. In this case, the pawn on c4. We attack it twice, whereas our opponent has only 1 defender. But be sure to calculate that number very carefully, because so many players are just forgetting that somehow there would be a bishop standing here on g8 without those pawns, and that would protect the pawn on c4, and then we blunder it and we lose our pieces. You don't want that. Just carefully look at this pawn on c4, which is the question here, and try to understand how many pieces attack it and defend it. In this case, it's only the queen who is defending it, so we can safely take it. Now, how do we decide whether we take with the rook and the bishop? Well, remember, our aim is to activate all of our pieces, to make it as active as possible, and to develop it as fast as possible. Also, you remember that threats is the third step of making an active move. Threat, if check and capture is simple, then threat is a little bit more complicated. It basically means creating an opportunity to make a very, very good move next turn. So for example, if we take here with the bishop, that would create a threat of winning the queen next move. Alternatively, if you take with the rook, that doesn't create any threats. So this move would be superior because it puts pressure on our opponent. If we put pressure on our opponent, he's gonna be sweating, he's gonna have a problem, and the chance that he is gonna make a mistake is much higher. In general, his life is going to be much more miserable if we create those problems. And remember, your main goal in task is to make your opponent's life as miserable as possible. So let us take and see whether opponent can create a chance to survive. Okay, queen to d8. I was expecting somewhere here, trying to create some checkmating ideas and so on. Okay, just queen d8 back. By the way, a very important advice for you. If it's possible, at all costs, avoid going backwards. You never want to go backwards. You always want to go forward, to attack, to create pressure, to checkmate your opponent. But if you go back, you can never be dangerous for your opponent. Okay, we have won a pawn. We shouldn't think like, okay, now I need to go all in and win another pawn and a knight and destroy my opponent immediately. No, we won a pawn. That was somehow a miracle. Our opponent blunder. Don't care. Just focus on what's important next. Remember, we still haven't finished our development, so let's do that. Let's not be like very fancy here. We have a rook here that's not working at all. Let's just develop it for now to the E file. That would help us to go forward. Now, very good example. Normally, the next step for us would be to develop our queen, but we never just randomly do that without looking at our opponent's move. The moment our opponent makes a move, this is going to save you from 99% of the blunders. So please, if you're going to take one thing out of this video, just take this one. Whenever your opponent makes a move, just forget about all of your plans, absolutely all of your ideas, whatever was in your head, just throw it away. Even if that was a picture of a very nice girl, that doesn't help you right now. Right now, you should be thinking about what your opponent wants to achieve. He played g5. What is the point? Well, what the pawn is doing here, can it go forward? It's not really dangerous. And of course, remember to start with the most active opportunities, which are checks, captures, and threats. So the pawn cannot give any checks, but it can capture the bishop on f4. And that's, oh my god, very dangerous. Blunder or wrong. You should really care about it. And so then you understand, okay, that's a problem for me. What can we do about it? Normally, if your piece is under attack, you have three ways to deal with it. You can either create a counter threat. This is like the most active one, that's why I start with it. Because if your opponent attacks your bishop, you might attack his queen and say, I don't care about the bishop if I can win the queen. Now, this is also the most difficult part, because then a lot of pieces are hanging suddenly, because you might use, I don't know, your knight to attack your queen, but then the queen escapes and attacks your knight, and now you have two pieces under attack. The bishop is hanging initially, and the second piece is hanging now in addition to that, and you are like, oh my god, everything is hanging, I'm about to blunder something. So this is a fancy stuff. The normal stuff is when your opponent is attacking your bishop, you can either just take whatever is attacking you. This is, by the way, also very active, but you need to check the number of attackers and defenders to be able to do that. We have here 1 and 2. Our opponent has 1 and 2 defenders. That's not an option. Remember, we always need more. And the third way is just to remove your piece out of the attack, just move it away, make sure you don't blunder it. This is the simplest thing, and that would be absolutely fine here. We just play bishop to g3 back. Now, this is another example of our opponent creating a threat for us. And he's really playing those hope chess that so many players on this level are doing. Please never do it yourself, and make sure you are taking advantage of the fact that your opponent is doing that. So our opponent is playing b5. The first thing is, of course, we forget about our plans. We already completely forgot about the fact that we wanted to develop our queen. That was so long ago. I'm just joking. Please always remember, development is the key. Even if it's already endgame and your opponent is constantly creating threats, still always remember at the back of your head that you need to bring all of the pieces into the battlefield. But first, what's the opponent idea? He played b5. What he wants to achieve? Any checks? No checks. Any captures? Yes, he's threatening to capture this bishop on c4. The first step is to create a counter threat. That's too difficult. We cannot hit his queens and the rooks. By the way, remember that if you want to create a counter threat, you have to attack at least as strong of a piece that is under attack or more. So it doesn't help to attack the pawn, for example, because our opponent is gonna just laugh at us and say, who cares about the pawns if I can get the bishop? You don't want that. But once again, it's too difficult. The simplest thing you can do is to check whether this piece that has moved can be taken. Because so many players at your level are completely stupid, let's be honest. So you check it, whether this pawn can be taken. And in this case, that's absolutely true, because nobody is guarding it. There is one attacker, no defenders. Of course, you try to understand. Maybe there is a catch. Maybe your opponent set up a trap. Maybe if you take this pawn, your opponent is gonna somehow win your bishop. I mean, if you are that smart, you really need to think what your opponent can do afterwards. And of course, this three system helps you here the most active opportunities, because if you're missing something, 99% of a chance it's either a check or a capture or a threat. If you're gonna check those three and your opponent is still gonna do something dangerous, then okay, you're not guilty. You're gonna say, okay, I have done my due diligence, I have done everything possible, it's just beyond my understanding what he's doing, and I'm gonna forgive you. But if you're gonna blunder a check, I'm gonna have serious questions for you. So here, whether our opponent can do anything dangerous, no checks, no captures, the bishop cannot be captured, anything else. By the way, notice that if you don't have any real weaknesses, like any pieces hanging, it's much more difficult to blunder anything. Right now, in my position, before this move b5, there is absolutely no pieces that are unprotected. This is what you should be aiming for to make sure you don't blunder anything in the first place. Now, after b5, I do have one piece hanging, but if I'm careful with what my opponent is doing, I'm gonna never blunder it. So yes, let's make a conclusion. We can take here on b5, and also we create a threat for the opponent. We attack that pawn on c6. Now, do you still remember that we wanted to develop our queen? Okay, no, first of all, we ask ourselves what the opponent wants to do. It's not like his knight was under attack, so he moved it somewhere, let's forget about it. No, it doesn't matter what were the circumstances. Still, the main question is what he wants to achieve, not like getting rid of the threat, but what he wants to do next move. Because maybe, yeah, the knight was hanging, but there was a bishop behind that knight that is now attacking the bishop. That was a discover attack. So you should never think about your opponent's move in terms of, well, he just wants to develop his piece, or, well, he just wants to get rid of the attack. No, what he wants to do next move, that is your real question. Our opponent, next move, wants to take this pawn. Remember, checks? Well, this knight cannot attack the king, there are no checks. Captures? Yes, the knight is attacking this pawn and wants to take it next move. So what can we do about it? We don't want to lose a pawn like that, so we just play a3, the simplest thing, not to really think about anything. And our opponent is doing this huge mistake. She is not thinking what we want to achieve. She's thinking that, okay, the pawn was hanging, her opponent moved it somewhere, and so let's forget about it. No, not only we have dealt with the threat of our opponent, we have created a threat of our own. We have attacked the knight. Our opponent plays bishop b7. We shouldn't be ridiculous and immediately take that knight and think, okay, the knight is hanging, my opponent is an idiot, let's take it. No, this is the wrong approach. The first thing that you should do, please remember it, you should think about your opponent's move. Because yes, maybe you can take this knight, but the queen would be on d5, this knight wouldn't be there, and then queen takes g2 would be checkmate in one, and so you are happy with taking that knight, but you still lose the game and you still suck at chess. So this is not the right approach. First, look at your opponent's move. Then realize, no, I'm not an idiot, he's an idiot, because there is absolutely no threat, I can just take the knight for free. Then you're allowed to do that. Let's do it. Our opponent takes on b4, and once again, let's think what's the threat, not just that he takes the pawn back, no, he actually created a threat, our rook is hanging. Can we create a counter threat? Well, we can, but that's too complicated. Let's not do that. Let's try to just move the rook. Where could the rook go? Here and here. What is the most active move? Well, it's rather e2. Let's move it there, because from here we have a perspective to go to the open file. Remember, please, that rooks always love the open files. Now, our opponent takes on f3, and we should not just play rook c2 like we wanted. No, once again, first of all, think what the opponent wants to achieve. He took here, first of all, he just grabbed the knight for free, and he's attacking the rook. This is very, very serious. So what can we do about it? Well, we can just take it back. Very simple. If our opponent takes something and we haven't made any mistakes, then there should be a way to take it back. This is the first thing to check at our disposal. Bishop d6, that is a move back. Normally, moves back are never dangerous for us, but we still make sure that it's actually the case. Bishop on d6, it's looking at this bishop on g3. It's just one attacker, and we have 1 and 2 defenders. It's absolutely no concern for us, so we can develop our pieces. Remember what we wanted to achieve. We want to develop our queen. We finally get a free move to do that. Imagine how many different threats our opponent has created for us in this last 5 moves that we had never time to develop our queen, but we still remember it in our head. I really encourage you to do that. It's going to help you so much. Because I understand, of course, as a strong chess player and an experienced one, that yes, rook to c2 is a better move. You're going to control all of the c file, and then those rooks are going to go forward, and that would be very dangerous for the opponent. But that is complicated. And bringing all of your pieces into the game is simple. Just remember, every single piece should make a move before another piece makes a second move, without a very good reason. Like the fact that our rook was hanging here was a good enough reason for us to make a second move before we actually develop the queen. But when you have a free move, if your opponent finally doesn't create any threats, then you decide which piece to move. And please never move a piece twice before you have moved every single piece at least once. And of course, try to make that move useful for yourself. So where should we put the queen? I see here few options, d3 and a4. a4 is more complex one. It's going to the side of the board. And remember, the main focus is always in the center. So to follow this principle, let's just play queen to d3. Now we have less pieces unprotected. That's always our goal, not to blunder anything. And secondly, the queen is controlling a lot of squares in the center. Normally, the queen is always good in the center. Just in the opening, the problem is it can easily get attacked. If our opponent cannot attack it, then in the center is the best position because it controls so many squares and queen works in all of the possible directions. Our opponent plays f5, so let's think what he wants to achieve. Does he create any threats? Well, definitely no checks, definitely no captures. The pawn is not threatening to take anything, but the pawns have a very special characteristics. They tend to go forward. So whenever your opponent moves a pawn, try to understand, maybe, just maybe, he wants to push it even further forward. What's going to happen in this case? In our case, yes, he wants to do that. He wants to play f4 because that's going to create a threat to take our bishop. And oh my god, our bishop has absolutely no squares to go. Even if we are going to exchange that pawn, it doesn't help. So we need to do something about it. I guess the simplest thing would be to take on d6. Why? Because there is one very important practical principle that helps you to win a real game. Whenever you have extra material on the board, in this case we have an extra bishop, it's a very good thing for you to exchange pieces. The more pieces you exchange, the simpler it gets for you to convert your advantage. Because imagine in the beginning you have won a piece, a knight like we did here. And so we have like 10 pieces against 9 pieces of our opponents because we have one more. But yeah, you wouldn't even really notice it at 1000 ELO till you are gonna count the number of all of the pieces. It's such a long way, who cares, right? But if you're gonna decrease the number of material from both sides, and instead of 10 against 9, that would be just 2 against 1, well, you're gonna immediately notice the difference. And also this difference is so much. It's like twice as many pieces, whereas 10 against 9 is just 10% more pieces. So this is a huge difference. That is why it's always beneficial for you to exchange the pieces. Now, of course, there are exceptions. Don't throw it at me, and chess is in general a game of exceptions. That is why all of the rules I'm teaching you here, they work in 99% of the cases. But you can, of course, find 1,000 of examples of that 1% and come here and say, all of you are saying is a bullshit. No, it's not. There are just exceptions. And that is what differentiates a very strong chess player. He understands where it's a case of an example, where, for example, it makes sense to put the knight not in the center, but to the side of the board, where suddenly it's going to make something useful. It's not for you. Never do that. Magnus Carlsen does that because he knows how to do it. You don't. So you should follow simple principles, like exchanging as many pieces as possible if you have some material advantage. Therefore, we are going to just take here on d6. Now, we have finally achieved our goal. All of our pieces are developed. What do we do next? Well, next, we need to make sure that all of the pieces are active, are actually doing something useful. For example, we can say we don't know what to do in this position. Yes, it seems like a promising one, but how do we understand how to continue? Because we had this goal, we have done everything to achieve that, developing all of the pieces, now we have done it. But what's the next step? It's so difficult. Like, what's our plan? Should we play here, try to checkmate our opponent? Should we go here and attack our opponent's queen? But what happens if he goes away? Maybe it's gonna just make it more difficult for us. To understand that, we have 3 questions that we should always focus during a chess game. It especially applies to the middle game and to the end game, because in the opening, well, you already know what to do. In the middle game, you should focus on the following 3 questions. First, what are the weaknesses? You look at your position and your opponent's position, and you try to identify where the weaknesses are. Second, you should think, what's your opponent idea? That's one we have already practiced quite a lot. You have already seen how important that is. And the third one, but this one applies during the whole game. Never, even for a second, forget about your opponent. You don't know that, but he is actually a very mean guy. So promise me, you're never gonna forget about your opponent's ideas. And finally, the third one, and this principle is going to help us in this position so much to understand what we actually need to do, which is the worst placed piece. This is essential. When you don't know what to do, improve your worst placed piece. In this case, this rook on e2, yes, we have already moved it twice, but it's not doing anything at all. And remember, rooks love the open files. So what do? We move this rook to the open file. And then we are going to decide what to do with it. Remember the first question, what are the weaknesses? Our opponent has moved his pawns quite a few times. That means that his king is now kind of naked. Maybe we can use it somehow. Maybe we could attack it. How can we attack it? Well, by bringing more pieces into the attack. So let's do that. Rooks really love to be on the 7th rank. This is where they are most powerful. And we have now 2 rooks over here gathered along the C file. It's an open file, so let's try to use it. Let's go forward, because when we have more material and we have the initiative, we should use it. We should not wait for our opponent to blunder all of his pieces. No, we need to create some pressure. And you see, our opponent, he is not that smart. He's only 1200 rated. So he is not capable of coming out with some really useful, some powerful ideas. And it's on our shoulders to come and destroy him. So that's what we are doing. We have bring 1 rook here. But what is better than 1 rook on the 7th? 2 rooks on the 7th. How to do that? Well, we can just play rook to b7. Just remember, before you make your move, you're moving a certain piece, let's say a rook. Before you are doing that, just make sure that that piece cannot be taken. If I want to play rook to b7, I'm thinking from all of the angles, can my opponent take that rook? If the answer is yes, then oh my god, I should not make that move, at least if the rook is not protected. But if the answer is no, and I like this move, then I have avoided the blunders, 99% of the cases, and I'm good to go. But you remember what we always start with? Checks, captures, and threats. In this case, we don't have any checks yet. We cannot really capture anything. I mean, we physically can, but make sure to count the number of attackers and defenders. And if the number of attackers is not more, then don't capture, because you're gonna blunder your piece. But we can create a threat. To create a threat basically means to attack something. What can we attack here? Not the king. It's unreachable for us right now. But there is a queen here standing kind of alone. Can we attack it somehow? Yes, we actually have multiple ways to do that. We can play rook c6, for example. But wait, we actually had an idea to have 2 rooks on the 7th, because 2 rooks on the 7th is like a killing blow for your opponent. He cannot do anything about it. So, can we achieve both of those goals at the same time? Yes, we can bring the rook to d7, attack the queen, and then the second rook will come and join the attack. Now, before making that move, we of course need to make sure that the rook cannot be taken. Well, it actually can. The queen can take it. But how many attackers and defenders there are? Well, the queen can only attack the rook once, so that would be 1 attacker. And we defend it also once. That would be 1 defender. So we are good to go. Let's make this move. And now, when the queen is going somewhere, we are ready to attack. Of course, as always, we never make our move immediately. We think what the opponent wants to achieve. Not just, okay, he moved his queen because we attacked it. No, maybe the queen is doing something very useful or something very active. It creates a threat for us. It actually does, because first of all, it attacks the bishop, but thank God the bishop is well protected. But also, it controls now so many squares here. And whenever we make our move, we should think, okay, what our opponent can move. And of course, we always start with the most active opportunities: checks, captures, and threats. Okay, so imagine we play rook to c7. Does he have any checks? This is the first question you should always ask yourself whenever you're about to make a move. Yes, our opponent actually has 1 check, queen to e1. Do we have a way to deal with it? For example, if the pawn would be here and the queen wouldn't be on d3, then that would be a checkmate. This is a big disaster. But here it's not the case. Do we have a way to deal with the check? Yes, we can just move king to g2. Then there are no other checks. Our opponent cannot do anything. And I understand, yes, I see that, but for you it might be difficult to see that there are no afterwards threats. So you should take some time to trying to understand that. And if you are sure that's the case, or if you have a feeling it's the case, because sometimes you cannot calculate everything till the end. You should just trust your intuition. If you don't trust your intuition, that's fine. Just play queen to c4 here, exchange the queens, because remember, as long as you exchange the pieces with extra material, you're good to go. But if you're a little bit like wants to go one level up, then you want to kill your opponent. You want to play rook c7 and threaten some really dangerous ideas. So you make sure that your opponent cannot kill you in the meantime, and then you go for it. Okay, our opponent takes on b2. Does it create any threats? Well, not really. He still can give one check here, but we have already figured out that's not the problem for us. He actually just took a pawn, otherwise it's not a big problem for us. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get the $200 limited time discount with the link in the description, and forget about all opening pain once and for all. Alright, so now that we know his threat is not really a threat, let's think about our move. And of course, always and always, we always start with a check. Can we give a check? Yes, we can give one check here, rook to g7. Can our opponent take the piece that is making a check? No, it cannot, because he has one attacker and we have one defender. The rook is untouchable. What he's gonna do? Let's try to calculate one move variation. We are gonna play rook to g7. We are given a check. He cannot capture the rook, so that means the king should go somewhere. Where the king can go? Well, the only available square is h8. Do we have any follow-up? And remember, we once again start with the check. Checks is just the key to success. At the same time, it doesn't mean that you're seeing a check and you make it, even if it's a blundering queen in one move. No, you never do that. You actually think whether this check is useful for you, and only if it is, then you go for it. Okay, so rook g7, king h8. Do we have another check? Yes, we have two check opportunities. We have rook to g8 check, and we have rook to h7 check. If you have two checks opportunities, then you need to calculate both of them and decide which one is better. As simple as that. First of all, can the piece that is making a check be captured? Yes, it can, because it has absolutely zero defenders and it has 1 and 2 attackers. Not good. So then the second check is rook takes h7. Can we do that? Well, we are given a check. There is one attacker for a rook and there is still one defender, so our opponent cannot do anything. That seems like at least we are winning a pawn. But let's try to continue the variation a little bit, because when our opponent has absolutely zero choice, he is not like having 5 different opportunities. It's much simpler for us to calculate a longer variation, because we just need to go one path. It's not like this tree of variation constantly growing. No, it's just one direct way, so we can calculate a little bit further. Rook g7, king to h7, rook takes, king to g8. And now can we give another check? Well, we can repeat the moves with rook g7, but we don't want to make a draw. We always want to destroy our opponent. Do we have another check? Yes, we have another one. Rook to g7 with a second rook. And now it cannot be taken because it's still protected. And does the king have any moves? Well, actually not. So that means that we are given a check. It doesn't have any moves. We are checkmating him. Wow, that's nice. We have calculated it till the checkmate. Let's make it on the board. Rook g7. Says some annoying comments, but we don't care about that. Actually, Yelena just told us, checks don't bother me so much unless it leads to mate. Well, Yelena, we have some bad news for you. Rook to g7 comes, and that is a checkmate. We have beat Yelena. Hurrah! 1200 rated. This is exactly what you need to think throughout the game to beat everybody around your rating group. I hope you learned so much out of this video. Let me know in the comments, please, whether you like this type of the videos. And here I'm showing you how you master this life-changing 3 questions method that's gonna bring you to a completely new level at chess if you truly learn how to use it.